Welcome to another episode of Brand Marks the Spot. It's your brand buddy, Patrick Sesko, and this show is all about how branding and design can help you take your business to the next level, and we do that through branding. And in today's episode, we are going to be talking about brand voice and why it matters. We're actually going to be defining what brand voice is if you don't know, why it's important, and how to sort of implement it into your business, especially for us smaller scale solopreneurs, online entrepreneurs. And this episode is brought to you by my brand roadmap, which we do cover brand voice in this document. Go ahead and grab this at patricksesko.com/brand roadmap. And it's basically an overview of all of the elements that go into building your brand and how they are all connected. So this is a free document. Go ahead and grab that. It's super valuable. And you can also use this as a auditing tool. And I will go ahead and put this up here just so in case you want to grab it further down the episode, you can. So I'm just checking to make sure we are live, and it appears that we are. So good. All right. So again, this episode, we are talking about your brand voice. And before I even go into the details of what this is, I kind of want to give you a little story or tell you a little story about when I was in college. This would have been most likely my freshman year, definitely my freshman year. Not sure if it was first semester or second semester. I was in community college and I was in an English class and I was struggling with it. And one of my friends who was in the class was a really good and accomplished writer. So one of the assignments and I'm ashamed to admit this, but I actually had him write a paper for me in the class because he was such a good writer. So why not go to someone who's really great to do that for you? And so, anyways, he wrote the paper for me, and it wasn't a very long one. And I turned it in, and the professor came to me and pulled me aside and basically said he knew that I didn't write the paper. So, and the reason why he said because it was not my voice. So I had obviously written some other assignments that he has read, and then when he read this one, it was very different than what I had turned in before. And it was pretty obvious in hindsight, especially, who was I trying to fool? In hindsight, it wasn't mine. And, he said, because it wasn't in your voice. Right. And in fact, the guy who wrote the paper used terms like wax poetic and stuff like that, that's something I wouldn't ever use. In fact, I didn't even know what it meant at the time. And, so that was kind of a little bit of a rude awakening. So needless to say, I failed that assignment, but he did, I think, give me an opportunity to turn something in that was my own. But again, long life lesson learned. Life is about learning. We're all growing, and I learned the hard way by doing something stupid. And anyways, it's something I never forgot. So always to write in your own voice. So I instantly got that failing grade because, again, it was obvious that the paper wasn't written by me. It was not in my voice. So let's talk about what brand voice is in your business. So you might think that your voice is your personality, but there's a slight distinction between brand voice and personality. You see, your brand voice is one dimension that articulates your brand personality. So things like language, grammar, sentence structure, the messages that you put out, your attitudes and your tone, they all work together to create a consistent perception about your brand and your business. So essentially, your brand voice is not only the things that you say, it's how you say them. So for example, excuse me, if you're like a very reserved professional, maybe you're, a doctor or something like that, or a traditional type of personality in your business, you wouldn't be communicating to your audience in like slang and like, hey, what's up, guys? And, people would not see that as somebody professional. I certainly wouldn't want to work with a doctor or a lawyer who was that sort of, just casual. Like, I don't mind casual because I'm a pretty casual guy myself. But if I'm going to go to a lawyer who's going to represent me or a doctor who's going to diagnose me, I want them to know what they're talking about. I want them to be professional. So, so like, I want them to be, factual. So alternatively, you wouldn't speak all prim and proper if your brand personality was something that was more laxed and wacky or rebellious, right? Another example is Red Bull, right? So they're associated with extreme sports and they have a very casual, witty, funny, snarky, and edgy tone to their brand voice. So, the saying, Red Bull gives you wings, and they don't even talk about the flavor or any of that stuff, right? So that's sort of the brand messaging, and the tone of voice that they have in their brand is how they deliver that message. And another example would be, say, Geico, right? They don't actually talk about how good their insurance coverage is, like, say, in their advertisements and their commercials. They don't talk about the features of their insurance. The only thing they talk about is how 15 minutes can save you 15% or more, right? So that's ingrained in our brain through repetition. And that is the message that they are delivering it. Now, how they deliver it is through funny and wacky commercials and things like that, often hilarious. And like I say, they don't even really talk about insurance, right? So that's their messaging is save 15% or more in 15 minutes. And how they deliver that is part of their brand voice. And then they also have like a gecko, which is sort of a character who's funny and silly too. So it sort of reinforces that brand voice. So that is how that works. So let's talk about why your brand voice is important. So essentially, your brand voice is what you say and how you say it, right? It's the specific words and phrases you use in all of your communications, from social media posts to emails, web copy, video and podcast contents. It's what articulates your personality and helps influence the perception that people have about your brand. So, and keep in mind that your brand voice is not the only thing that articulates your brand personality. But when you combine your brand voice with other things like your visuals, your messaging, your actual offers, all those things, then it becomes a way to articulate it when it's all sort of working in together in concert, if you will. And that's kind of how you can overarchingly articulate how your brand is different from others. So usually one component of building your brand, whether it's your visuals or whether it's your tone of voice or your brand personality, those things don't individually do all the work. It's when they all come together that that's where the magic happens. And when you can articulate these things pretty concisely to a specific audience, you create a powerful and hopefully positive perception in the minds of your audience. And that is what can make attracting an audience of ideal customers easier and more effective. So, how can you articulate your brand? Well, big brands like Apple and Nike, they have like super comprehensive brand guidelines that are very stringent, and they need to do that to protect their brands. And that's why they're so effective, though, at their marketing, and their businesses are so effective. But the reason why they have these documents and very stringent guidelines is because they have hundreds, if not thousands, of content creators. So they have different teams working on web copy, different teams working on nomenclature, to use a fancy word, which is, for brochures and things like that. Social media, all these different things that different people are working on. And when you don't have those things sort of defined, you might have a group creating stuff over here and a group creating stuff over here. If they don't have that definition or that guideline of what your brand voice should be, then they're not going to match. And that's much more difficult to do when you're on a much larger business. So you have to, in order to like scale, you're going to need to have a brand voice. And some of the bigger names even have, there are brand voice consultants that'll come in and really narrow down what your brand voice should be and articulate it and create guidelines based on that. So that way, when anybody is creating content or messaging or advertising or any of that stuff, all the brand voice elements are going to be part of that. So that way, everything they do is consistent. So it needs to basically sound like it's written by the same person. Now, like I said, many big brands do have these brand voice consultants, but for our smaller businesses like ours are solopreneurs or online entrepreneurs, where it's either usually us doing the majority of the work, or maybe we are acting as CEOs and we have small teams of contractors or VAs. We don't need to get that fancy for our smaller scale audiences. But if you do plan to scale down the road and have other people take on and delegate some of those things, you do need to have an idea of what your brand voice is, and it's got to be documented somewhere, so that way those people can run, can run off with what's the word I'm looking for? They can take off and do it on their own without you having to monitor every single word that they write. And as your voice becomes more important, your brand voice becomes more important as time grows, for that very reason, because again, you want to make sure that it's consistent. And if multiple people are working on different parts of your business and they don't understand what your brand voice is, it's not going to sound like you. There won't be consistency, and most of your audience will, like me, get a failing. They'll give you a failing grade and either not do business with you or not have trust in you or any of those things. So here are a couple of things. For us, I'd like to keep it simple because we are wearing all the hats in our businesses most of the time. And so in order to keep it simple, here are a couple things that you can do to articulate your brand voice. So remember, the content should sound like you. There shouldn't be some big disconnect of how your content and means your words, your videos, all that stuff needs to really sound like you talk in real life. So what I've learned is just to create a document, Google Doc, Word doc, whatever, that has a brain dump of like common words and phrases. And even if it's slang, if you talk in slang, just write it all down, brain dump. You're not going to use it all per se, and use all and write down all those things that you do in real life. So for instance, I use things like "what's up" or "that sucks" or "dang" or "I got shafted," or I say "dude" a lot or whatever, So that's kind of my personality. I don't want to have to work so hard to put off this fake facade of somebody who's maybe more prim and proper or something like that, because it's just not me. And when you do that, it becomes work. It's not congruent with how you really are, and it's not fun, right? And if it's not fun, then why do you want to do it? So one of my values is business should be fun. So why not just be yourself? So one exception is that in my real life, I do curse a lot, with my buddies and whatnot. But I made a conscious decision to not include a lot of that into my brand personality, because while yes, that is sort of how I talk, and I'll drop a word here and there when appropriate, but I just did that out of respect, because a lot of people might be listening with their kids, and I have kids, so I know what that's like. Out of respect for those who don't partake in that sort of banter. But like I said, I occasionally do let one fly from now and again. So one little technique you can do is like either record or be really cognizant of, say, a conversation you might have with one of your buddies. What are the things that you say? Like I know I'm from Maryland, so, sometimes I say y'all, even though that's kind of like a Southern thing. And technically Maryland is a Southern state, but I do say y'all. And so, do you say that? What kind of slang, what kind of dialect do you use? That might hint as to where you're from, or, those kinds of things. And when you do that, when you focus on the conversations that you might have with somebody, a buddy of yours or your family or your wife or whoever, pay attention to what you say. Pay attention to some of the phrases you use, the words you use, the cadence in which you speak. All of these things can help you extract the essence of what your brand voice is. So the bottom line here is, this is not a really complicated thing. The bottom line is to write and talk as you would in real life. If you have a casual tone, then speak casually. If you have a professional tone, then speak professionally. Like, I struggled with this quite a bit, because while I am, a casual guy, I'm a musician, I'm playing out, I drop, the F-bomb all the time with my buddies. I came from the corporate world, so it was always like having to use, all the corporate jargon and speak and all that. And early on in my entrepreneurial career, is like I always spoke like that because, the clients I were trying to attract were marketing directors, but there was no personality in that. I was really cold. And, I like to think that I'm a warm guy. I'm friendly. I'm your brand buddy. I'm like an everyday kind of guy. Right. And I found that over time, I sort of evolved into being more comfortable with being who I am as I put myself out into the interwebs with my brand voice. And I just talk like I talk. Now, I'm still professional. Like, I still deliver, I still have values, I still have integrity. So you can still be professional and still be yourself. Obviously you don't want to, be yourself and then just like drop the ball or ghost somebody. So those things will obviously hurt your brand and your business. But those are the things you need to kind of, worry about. But again, the bottom line is to write and talk like you do in real life, and just speak in how you would normally speak to people. That's how you're going to build connection, because then you are being authentic. Because, that's a buzzword. Authenticity has been a buzzword big time, but that's just basically what it is. Just be who you are. Don't try to be somebody you're not, because it's going to be obvious. And in the end, people are going to give you that failing grade. They're going to know. Let's say you go to a website and you're looking for a lawyer or something, and you go to a website, you read their website. It's very professionally done. It's kind of prim and proper. And then you say get into a meeting with them, and then they're just like, they show up in jeans and a ripped up t-shirt, and they're like, yo, what's up? What's up? Like, there's a disconnect there. Like, I might be like, whoa, that's not who I was sort of expecting, because that's not what your website sort of conveyed. So when you start becoming more authentic, now if you're the lawyer there and you want to be that ripped shirt jeans kind of guy, then be that guy, but just be transparent from the get-go and be who you are. And so that's how, personality and tone of voice and brand voice really sort of work together. It helps articulate that personality. So you do that, you'll begin to see over time that you're going to start to connect with your audience. Not everybody, because remember, we're not trying to attract everybody. We're trying to attract our people, our tribe, as Seth Godin says. So you're going to connect with your audience more deeply and more authentically, because you are being yourself. So that's what I got for you today. Again, I do go over the brand voice part of your brand build in the brand roadmap. So you can grab that at patricksesko.com/brand roadmap. And that's what I got for you today. Hope you guys have an awesome week. I will talk to you in the future. See ya.